All right, peace. Welcome to another episode of We Charge Colonialism podcast and book club. I am Ikemba, member of the Public Relations Committee.
Peace, everyone. This is Tierney. I'm the steering committee chair for We Charge Colonialism.
Right. And so we are We Charge Colonialism. Happy to be here for another episode. Just want to encourage everyone that's viewing to like and share this episode so we can continue to expand our reach. And so we charge colonialism. As we do, we usually do our weekly roundup, and then we're going to get into our text. We're reading How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Walter Rodney. So for all of those who want to know where we're going to be starting at, that's going to be on chapter 2. We're starting on chapter 2, page 51 in the PDF, and page 33 in the book. So that'll be the second half of our podcast and book club. So again, we're going to start off just talking about what's going on around the world. But just so people know, We Charge Colonialism is an organization that's fighting against colonial conditions, against the colonial institution that has been affecting African lives since the 1500s. Earlier than that, since the 1400s to be exact. That's when this process of slavery and colonialism started to take place on the continent and then the Americas. And so it is this relationship of between Africans and Europeans, this colonial relationship that we are fighting against to overturn. And so We Charge Colonialism is fighting against that. And this particular podcast and book club is just to use the media outlet as a means to spread the word about what's happening with African people throughout the world. So with that being said, we're going to go into our first weekly roundup. So I know, Tierney, you go into Haiti.
Yeah, so there's been some news reports that have come out. And I don't know, the story is an interesting one as it's playing out. So some of you might know, currently, there's a lot of infiltration in Haiti as far as the U.S. government. And a news story came out that some missionaries were supposedly kidnapped by a gang inside of Haiti. There was 17 in total. There was 16 Americans, 1 Canadian. I believe they're all white, and we should talk about the history, obviously, of white missionaries who are being sent as agents of infiltration. But so essentially, what happened is that these people were taken supposedly by this gang, and they're offering $1 million per each per person. Something I thought was interesting when I was looking at this story was the FBI, who, it's interesting. They're not automatically jumping at this, which kind of makes me think that there's something else going on, because I thought this was going to be like an automatic infiltration, but I think this could be something, or not infiltration, invasion. This could be something that's leading up to a larger narrative that Haiti does need an invasion. But yeah, the FBI is just monitoring, and this is 17 white people, 16 who are Americans, and this to me was the perfect opportunity for them to jump in. So I don't know if you've seen this story, Ikemba, but what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know, when you had brought it to my attention, of course, the first thing I'm thinking about Grenada, but also Haiti, of course, because America relations with Haiti, what's what I'm trying to say, but their relationship with Haiti, as far as just going into the country and undermining Haiti's government, undermining Haiti's economy, has been happening for a long time. I think it's 1915 when the United States first invaded Haiti, and it wasn't the last time. So when you brought it up, I'm just looking at this as another pretext, for the United States of America to go into Haiti and again get involved into Haitian affairs. But the other thing, though, you had brought up like the missionaries, and this quote unquote gang who kidnapped these missionaries. Like if you look at the history of just missionary activity in Africa and also in the Caribbean and other places, one of the things that I always notice is just how the people really respond to the missionaries. Like a lot of these places where these missionaries were at and are at, the indigenous people really didn't want them there. Like at least the majority of people, like they looked at them as a operative of the colonial government. And so, but what would happen is that they would accept them because their livelihood would sort of be dependent on what the missionaries had to offer as far as like education, even like resources, whether it's food and so forth. So this dependency on these missionaries would allow them to continue like benign relationships with them. But anytime that there will be a problem in these countries, so like West African countries, Sierra Leone, Liberia, there's just histories in these countries, and also in Haiti, as we see now, when there's a problem, well, who do they attack? They attack the foreigners. They attack the missionaries. And so with Haiti going through all of this disruption with the assassination of the president recently, now we have this chaos in Haiti. And who are they going after? The foreigners, the missionaries, because those are the people, they're coming from countries where people have the resources at the end of the day. And so, and it boils down to the economics. Just the last piece too. Actually, I lost my train of thought, but those are my initial thoughts.
All good. I'm sure we'll come back. Yeah, and just some more details to fill in. So it's important to keep in mind that this same missionary group has been accused, the same organization that has sent these missionaries has been accused of having molestations of children in Haiti on their watch. I'm reading from one article. It says CAM, which stands for Christian Aid Ministries. They came under public scrutiny in 2019 when one of the group's former workers based in Haiti was convicted of felony sexual abuse against minors in Ohio. And he is serving a 9-year sentence in Ohio in prison, which is kind of low to me for molestation, because it's not just one child. That's even makes it worse. I know of like one child, you have like 20 years at least, but he only got 9 years. During the hearing, Mass, who was convicted, he was told that he molested at least 30 boys in Haiti in a span of about 15 years. So this is, something that is serious that happens historically, obviously, but also I noticed particularly in Haiti, it seems like a lot of these predators are just inhabiting the island and are doing horrible things. And because Haiti gets this broad brush painted over it that it's just this horrible place, no one's willing to really like look into it. I mean, could you imagine if something like this happened? Could you imagine a Haitian missionary coming to America and molesting 30 white boys? Like that would just never happen. So this is, to me, it could be a larger story about retribution, because this is the same organization. And to me, if the organization had decency, it would probably withdraw after that happened in the first place. But they're still intact, and they're still sending people over. So there's that history. And then there's also the fact that, like you mentioned, Ikemba, I didn't realize that there's like a plethora of apparently like a lot of foreign nationals who go over to Haiti can get kidnapped. I think I read something like over like 600 people. I can't find the exact stats. And so this is something, that I think is the result of whenever America keeps committing crimes against the people and has no type of there's no type of way to get justice for the people. Well, you see different ways where the system collapses around the people. And obviously, if you try to go into those areas, you could very much be a victim of the retribution that America is owed. So I think it's a larger picture, but I definitely think I'm really like, to me, the fact that the FBI didn't are just monitoring. I'm really wondering what's going on behind the scenes, because I'm really foreseeing this could be a situation like Grenada. And if you don't know what happened in Grenada, Essentially, I believe it was in order Maurice Bishop was assassinated, and by a U.S. sponsored coup, of course. And then, it's like, oh, what's going on? This is horrible. We have to go in and save them. And then the United States came in and completely overthrew the country, and the country has never recovered or been what it once was under Maurice Bishop. So this could be another instance of that, like you pointed out.
Yeah, and one of the things too I was thinking is when Malcolm X, he was talking about the Congo and the speech is titled his last speech. If for those who are interested in checking it out, but in there he talks about what the Congo. He talked about the missionaries over in the Congo, and when they were killed or harmed. The newspapers would say white missionaries, they would emphasize that. But, it also, that just brings me back, fast forward to this, what's happening in Haiti. And I was looking at a video and a woman, Haitian woman was speaking, and she said that, she said, this is something, she said, the crazy thing about it is that this is something that is happening every day. And she said that, 50 people were kidnapped the other day. And I'm like, dang, but there's emphasis on these 17 missionaries that were kidnapped. But we all know like these sort of things are taking place every day. And not just missionaries are suffering, not suffering, but things are not just happening to missionaries. Other people are being kidnapped, murdered, raped, and so forth in Haiti, and our citizens too. People who are actually living there. And so, like these, and then when we start talking about those problems, that's when we had to start talking about the economy, getting into the politics of Haiti and why Haiti is the way that it is now. Going to the root of the problem. And this is something that they don't want us to look at. They just want us to look at and say, oh, Haiti's in chaos, this, poverty and so forth. But they don't want us to like really get to the root of why Haiti's the way it is right now, because we're going to have to start looking at these colonial powers when we do that.
And you touched on something that I think is important. In fact, I think when I was, growing in consciousness, like early on, that's probably one of the first things I noticed is, how it's so easy for the media to brush aside when Africans or any indigenous people that aren't, Western Europeans or whatever, like, it's really easy for them to brush aside when people die, but like the second Americans are of the number, like I remember like times where you would have like a mass, attack in Africa to be like 200 nationals who die, and then 5 Americans, and like they have to say 5 Americans, like, and then that's what makes the story bigger. And that to me is a more indictment also on the media, because the interesting thing about the media is that no matter how much they get called out on their racism, they never feel the need to change, or evolve, much at least. For example, there's always been called out, this media is so focused on white girls who disappear, but they're not focused on all of the black girls who disappear. And, just once again, I don't know the girl's name, but the white girl that disappeared and everyone was in a frenzy, like they keep repeating the same things. Similarly, you'll always see the media focus in whenever it's an American national who is the one that's victimized overseas, is despite the fact that so many Africans are also living inside of this chaos constantly, and they're constantly getting kidnapped. So that's a good point to point out, that the media is racial biased. They don't feel the need to change, and frankly, they don't get called out on it much. I haven't heard people call out the fact that you're so focused on this handful of people, yet all of the masses of people who are also facing certain things. And the worst part about it is that of those people who are facing those things, it's all America's fault. Like you said, like they've been going in Haiti and disrupting the country's stability for decades. So this is, just another reminder of the media, the fact that the media is very much a racist institution in itself.
Yeah, indeed. We gonna see Haiti free though. In our lifetime. So I know we got to move on to the next story. But I think, we all should continue to monitor what's happening in Haiti and other places, because we are directly related no matter what this society wants to have us believe. So going into the next story, I was looking at something that happened out in Oregon. This is a story that was actually brought to my attention on Instagram. Somebody had directly messaged me this video of a brother, Barry Washington, who was shot and killed out in Oregon. And so, just up to date at this time, hopefully everyone has heard this story. But I'm going to just read a couple of paragraphs. It says, a Central Oregon man is being charged with murder over the death of 22-year-old Barry Washington Jr., who was shot outside a nightclub in Bend on September 19th. Police arrested Ian Cranston at his home in Redmond on Thursday evening, soon after a Deschutes County grand jury returned an indictment on 6 charges: second-degree murder, first-degree manslaughter, second-degree manslaughter, first-degree assault, and 2 counts of unlawful use of a deadly weapon. Washington, a black man, was unarmed at the time of his death. Cranston, the accused shooter, is white. The shooting sparked outrage among racial advocates in Bend. But just going into, I'm not going to read the rest of that, but just going into that story, this is a brother, Barry Washington, who apparently had hit on, not physically, but tried to speak to a woman, this man's girlfriend in the nightclub. And so altercation had broke out, a struggle between the two, and Barry Washington was shot. This was done in the downtown area. The lady who talked about the story, she sort of broke the story at the time. The shooter wasn't arrested. He was allowed to go home. And this was one of the reasons she was raising what happened, because she was talking about how this guy was allowed to go home. He's not behind bars after this incident. She talked about how there was racial epithets that was thrown around after he was shot, how the girlfriend and the guy was laughing while Barry Washington was shot dead on the floor, or at least dying on the floor. So she was upset. And this was somebody that was from that community. So she was trying to, get the story out there. It was sort of reminiscent of Ahmaud Arbery, when I was hearing about it. And so then, as I looked into the story later on, the guy was arrested, and I guess they, had to arrest him before it got out of hand too, before, the word spread that this murderer is walking around free. But I think this is just something that, we have to, understand that these type of stories are still happening, where man is being shot over white women. There's a history of that here. I think for one, us in this fight in our struggle for power, as black men and black women, I encourage us to stay within our community and date our own. But regardless on what a person's choice is, they shouldn't be murdered because of the color of their skin and who they talk to, whether they're white or whoever. But yeah, just wondering if you had any thoughts about that.
Lots. Yes, it's disturbing, and what it makes me think of, I always think of Ida B. Wells, who I'm sure all of us know, the great Crusader, the African woman who went around the country when the news was not reporting about the lynchings of Africans, primarily down south. She would go and report, risk her life, dangerous situations that were outwardly racist, and she would go and report on these lynchings that no one knew about. And she became a very dangerous figure for that. And the unfortunate thing about today is that this was a lynching. I've seen someone in the comments saying lynching. This was a lynching, obviously. You have the same type of factors. You have the white woman, you have the threatened white male, you have the very harmless, whether it's a compliment or a look or a whistle or I thought you said this, you have that action, and then obviously you have the death. And you even have, like you said, you see the pictures of people getting lynched and people are smiling and happy, like you said, they were laughing at this. It's like all of the signs of a lynching. The unfortunate thing is that a lot of our people obviously are asleep and they don't realize that. I would say, I don't think the lynching slowed down at all. I remember when I was in high school, I remember there was this story that came out. There was this guy who I guess was a black guy. He had a white girlfriend, and they went to a party, and her white brothers basically saw her with this black guy, killed this guy, and cut up his body like, I don't know if they used a chainsaw or what, but they literally cut up his body in pieces. That was a lynching, but we don't like gather these information together like, you know, like we did it before, because it was more outward. You know, they were posing with pictures and it was in the newspaper. Hey, someone got lynched today. Come look, we have a postcard. Like, so we have to more so be on it, I think, as far as like telling these stories. And I'm happy you brought this one. We have to be on it as far as circulating this around our community. And I think it should be, if when we do those things, it should be a wake-up call, because so many of us be moving like, you know, this is post-racial America. So many of our African men, so many of our African women, you know, we take for granted the fact that we are in enemy territory. And we have to always be conscious. No, we are literally, we're literally fighting for our lives. You know, you might have white friends, you might have a white spouse or whatever. Like, you might live this idea that you're safe, but you're not safe, because the second that you enter into the wrong person's domain, your life could be taken. And unfortunately, because like I said, it's not as outward and as out in the open for everyone to scrutinize, unfortunately, you know, it won't be enough press usually to even for people to connect the dots, like, hey, there was a lynching today. So the stories like this put it on us as a community. We have to make sure that we're gathering these things and categorizing them and putting it out, so that we can have a truthful outlook of what America is today, because it's not what they show us. It's not what they show us in DC with the Congressional Black Caucus, you know, kneeling on one knee and singing "Lift Every Voice and See." That's not what America is today. What America is today is a very violent and racial society. Until we are willing to struggle with that truth, you know, then we're going to keep, unfortunately, thinking that these are isolated incidences and not a connected plethora of racial events that have always plagued our people.
Yeah, I mean, we can't ignore it away. You know, I think a lot of people just want to ignore it and hope that it'll one day go away. And they go about their daily lives as long as they're able to survive to some extent within this system. You know, they think that the racism, because it's not blatant in their face, it doesn't impact them. But if you're getting paid less than, you know, a person because of the color of your skin, you know, that's racism impacting you. You know, when you know, you're unable to move in particular neighborhoods, you know, you're because of the color of your skin. And they'll do things as far as just like up the price on you, you know, because of who knowing who you are, you know, what your ethnic background is. Oh, okay, we're going to sell it for this much, or you know, it's just like so many different things that impact us because of where we're from and what we look like. And so, you know, just because you're able to survive to some extent under the system without having to experience racism blatantly doesn't mean that it doesn't impact you. And so that's why the struggle has to continue to go on until we're, you know, a liberated people. But even just like listening to this story or reading up on this story, it made me think about another story, Albert Wilson of Kansas, you know, who was sentenced to 12 years for a rape charge of a white woman, which I don't, you know, if you read the story, not going, you know, go too deep into it, but look into Albert Wilson's story. And I don't know, the evidence just says that he did not do what this woman said that he did. And, you know, luckily, not luckily, but thankfully he has a new, there's an appeal. He has a new trial date set for February the 28th, because, and that just goes to show how much the first case, the initial case, like how much misinformation was put out and how he did not get a fair trial. Because if it was a fair trial, we wouldn't be here February 28, 2022, trying to get this man who was a college student, you know, never had any trouble at all with the law, you know, just walking a straight path, and just got caught up in an unfortunate situation where he was with this woman for less than 5 minutes. You know, like there's video, all types of stuff, but I know that's not the story. But you know, just like us getting caught up in these situations in this racist society where we find ourselves being lynched, whether it's by the jury or being lynched, like my brother Barry Washington in a bar, shot dead at the age of 22. So, it's just unfortunate.
And it is the same story to me because it's, it keeps happening. And like I said, until we start, I feel like, if someone is a journalist and watching this or something like that, like, let us know if this is something you're doing, or, someone who's doing this, and we can just give them more attention, give these types of stories more attention, because it really is truly what's happening on a daily basis. And then there's another aspect of this, I think, is that unfortunately, like on the media, I think the media is mind control. Everything that we're being fed, like even if you look at the types of stories that we're being fed, whether it's Netflix or like, it's like we're possibly being fed this like crazy idea that we're in this post-racial society, and a lot of us believe that because maybe we grew up in a certain place. But you go in a certain towns, you know what America you're in. I grew up in a town with I grew up in Pittsburgh, so we have some Black people and whatnot. But I remember going up north to college, and I remember being called a nigger a few times. Like, so it's just important for us to understand that this country has not changed. Even though they act like they've changed, they haven't. And I'm sure many of us know this, but unfortunately a lot of us don't.
No doubt, no doubt. Oh, you on the other side of PA.
Yeah, that's where I grew up.
Okay, all right. Yeah, PA is a red state.
If you go outside of Philly, you're like basically in a Klan town. It's like Texas.
Yeah, it's crazy here. And I had that same experience outside of Philadelphia, going into certain communities that you don't see a lot of us at, and being called the nigga. I remember that as a youth with my family, our whole family being called one. So that's definitely here. And but talking about also these situations with these cases from Albert Wilson, Barry Washington, who unfortunately he's not here to fight in this case, but that's why we created the Justice Bank, though. It's something important where people who have these situations where they're racially discriminated against, unjustly accused of a crime, we have to create our own means of being able to defend ourselves, financially, as well as militarily and so forth. But at least the Justice Bank is a situation where we have resources to be able to help those people who may need bail or anything like that. And that's for people who are members of We Charge Colonialism. So that's a segue into telling people to join We Charge Colonialism, be a part of this fight. So send us an email at info at WeChargeColonialism, info at WeChargeColonialism.org, and find out how you can become a member of the organization and how you can play a part in this fight to liberate ourselves from colonial conditions. You can also
I don't interrupt you.
Okay. Visit our website, WeChargeColonialism.org, to learn more about our organization, what we have done and what we are continuing to do. But yeah, become a member today. So go ahead, Tierney, you wanted to say something?
No, I realized we didn't shout out our brother Frank. He was in the chat. I think he's watching, who's coming back soon. So if y'all don't know, it's usually not just me and Ikemba. We have a third person who has been healing, and we sending him, our prayers that he quickly get back here. But he'll be back soon. So shout out to Frank. And also Ikemba, who's also not just a member of We Charge Colonialism. He's also in Imperialism. So just tell everyone that they can follow you, because I know people watch you, but they might want to actually see which stuff that you put out as well.
Yeah, if you want to follow me on IG, you can check me out at Global Ubuntu Foundation. That's Global Ubuntu Foundation. You can check me out there on IG. And just Ikemba Jore or Ikemba Balanta on at Facebook. And also on IG, but primarily, I use the Global Ubuntu Foundation. So check me out there. I'm not used to telling people where they can follow me.
I hate when people tell me to. I'm like, oh, wait.
Yeah, I guess I got to get better at doing that. But yeah, but definitely follow me and see what I got going on. Yeah, so we're going to transition into the book club. Let me make sure I don't lose any power though. Again, we're reading from How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, Walter Rodney. We've already delved into chapter 1. Last couple of weeks, we've been looking that over. We're going to go into chapter 2 today, page 33 in the book. And if you're using a PDF, which there should be a link for, you can go to page 51. And so, yeah, I love this book right here because it definitely, Walter Rodney is coming with the dialectics, he's getting into this struggle between the colonized and the colonizer, but he's going back into history and how this development is taking place. So he's giving us the historical struggles of the oppressed against the oppressor. And so he's talking about this. So far, like what we've been like really going into is like what development is and what that looks like. And in the first chapter, he also talks about what underdevelopment looks like. And so as we go into chapter 2, I think he's going to now get into what both of these societies look like and really get into now how their relationship with each other transformed both of their lives, how it benefited one and not the other. So I'm going to start with the quote.
And real quick, y'all, the book link is inside of the chat. Miss Hattie just posted it for us.
Right on. So yeah, before even the British came into relations with our people, we were a developed people, having our own institutions, having our own ideas of government. By J.E. Casley Hayford, 1922, African Gold Coast nationalist. That shit, we could just build on that quote right there. A general overview. It has been shown that using comparative standards, Africa today is underdeveloped in relation to Western Europe and a few other parts of the world, and that the present position has been arrived at not by the separate evolution of Africa on the one hand and Europe on the other, but through exploitation. As is well known, Africa has prolonged and extensive contact with Europe, and one has to bear in mind that contact between different societies changes their respective rates of development. To set the record straight, 4 operations are required. 1, reconstruction of the nature of development in Africa before the coming of Europeans. 2, reconstruction of the nature of development which took place in Europe before expansion abroad. 3, analysis of Africa's contribution to Europe's present developed, quote unquote, developed state. 4, analysis of Europe's contribution to Africa's present, quote unquote, underdeveloped state. The second task has already been extensively carried out in European literature, and only passing references need be made, but the others are all deserving of further attention. The African continent reveals very fully the workings of the law of uneven development of societies. There are marked contrasts between the Ethiopian Empire and the hunting groups of pygmies in the Congo forest, or between the empires of the Western Sudan and the coastline hunter-gatherers of the Kalahari Desert. Indeed, there were striking contrasts within any given geographical era. The Ethiopian Empire embraced literate feudal Amharic noblemen, as well as simple Kaffa cultivators and Gala pastoralists. The empires of the Western Sudan had sophisticated, educated Mandinga townsmen, small communities of Bozo fishermen, and nomadic Fulani herdsmen. Even among clans and lineages that appear roughly similar, there were considerable differences. However, it is possible to distinguish between what was uniquely African and what was universal in the sense of being characteristic of all human societies at a given stage of development. It is also essential to recognize the process of dialectical evolution from lower to higher forms of social organization, and in looking at the most advanced social formations, one would appreciate the potential of the continent as a whole in the direction of change. The moment that the topic of the pre-European African past is raised, many individuals are concerned for various reasons to know about the existence of African civilizations. Mainly, this stems from the desire to make comparisons with European civilizations. This is not the context in which to evaluate the so-called civilizations of Europe. It is enough to note that behavior of European capitalists from the epoch of slavery through colonialism, fascism, and genocidal wars in Asia and Africa. Such barbarism causes suspicion to attach to the use of the word civilization to describe Western Europe and North America. As far as Africa is concerned, during the period of early development, it is preferable to speak in terms of cultures rather than civilizations. Guess we can build.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot being said. So if you're,
Yeah. I definitely thought it was important though when he talked about the 4 operations that are required, and he goes into he lists the 4, and he talks about number 2. He says that one has already been like extensively looked at. We look at number 2. It says reconstruction of the nature of development which took place in Europe before expansion abroad. So we're talking about before 1492 and that history. And we all know like that's a history that has been extensively looked at. Even if we talk about Roman history, the history of the Greek of Greece, and even, European, even when you talk about the medieval period of Western Europe, going into the Renaissance, like this is stuff I can just like rattle off. And I haven't even extensively studied. This is like a lot of stuff that I just learned about in school and passing and just doing a little bit of research. Yeah, stuff that's just like drilled in. And so, and I think like that's important as we see like how Europe has always made sure they centered themselves and made themselves the subjects of history. And so, and so now, I think I'm glad that he's like placing this emphasis. One is to place this emphasis on studying these other aspects of society. We look at our aspects of civilization or cultures, as he would say, right? And for me, it was interesting like learning about West African history, even during the same period where they called like the Middle Ages or medieval period of Europe. Just looking at what Africa was doing in Western Africa and North Africa, and how much was being accomplished in these parts during the same period of time. And so it's like, how come the emphasis wasn't put on there? But we know this is all has to do with colonialism and colonial education. But that's something that stood out to me. There's some other stuff I wanted to, see if you want to add.
On that point, it's so sad. It always makes me want to cry when I think about the fact that I feel like I don't know, and this is me like at a point where I'm going back to try to learn African history. I feel like I still don't know so much of our history because it's so extensive, and there's so many different empires. There's so much of our culture, and going back, it's so hard to try to catch up and have a full understanding of all of our accomplishments. It's really sad if you think about it. Like we're literally a people who, most of us don't know anything of our history, and a lot of us like are so minimal that what we do know. What I love though that Walter Rodney's doing is like I feel like he's taking a term that's usually used to diminish Africans. Development, when I usually hear it in regards to African society, is basically a negative thing. It's usually them pointing a finger at Africa and saying, why aren't you developed yet? Why haven't you done this? Why haven't you done that? And it's kind of flipping the term to help us rethink about how we're measuring development, because as he said, the European society that was supposedly so developed was morally corrupt. So how do you categorize them as developed with the transatlantic slave trade? How do you categorize them with all of the wars, the genocidal wars? That's the intra-racial wars in Europe were very serious. I think that's something that people don't understand. They killed their people like crazy. But that's the society that we now call the developed society. And obviously there's so much, like the bloodshed is endless. Africa, obviously, Asia, Latin America, the bloodshed is endless. And so how are we allowing these people to set the standard for us of what civilization is and what development is? So this really puts it on us to have a more holistic understanding of what development should be. Instead of taking the terms that are often used to depict us as backwards, we should be flipping this term and saying, how developed can you be whenever you have military bases in all of these countries and are practicing mass surveillance, whenever you're extracting resources from these countries? How development are you as a people? So it's really, I think, powerful when we start taking our terms back. I remember, I think one of Kwame Tore's books, it begins off just talking about the importance of taking back the terms and using it, for your own good. That's something that we have to practice regularly, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think he's going to get into these terms as culture and civilization. I'm gonna continue on. But I think like that's important too, because that's something I always felt was problematic in the labeling of certain societies as civilizations, as if like other societies that existed before, that the developments that took place in Mesopotamia or in the Nile Valley, like what was happening before those communities are not considered civilizations because of this criteria that they created for a society to be deemed a civilization. But we look at these civilizations, there was nothing like really civil about them, But I'm gonna go into what he's going to say in the next paragraph. So a culture, we're on page 34 in the book, and I think page 52 on the PDF. Looking at the second paragraph, a culture is a total way of life. It embraces what people ate and what they wore, the way they walked and the way they talked, the manner in which they treated death and greeted the newborn. Obviously, unique features came into existence in virtually every locality with regard to all social details. In addition, the continent of Africa, south of the Great Sahara Desert, formed a broad community where resemblances were clearly discernible. For example, music and dance had key roles in uncontaminated African society. They were ever present at birth, initiation, marriage, death, as well as times of recreation. Africa is the continent of drums and percussion. African peoples reached the pinnacle of achievement in that sphere. Because of the impact of colonialism and cultural imperialism, which will be discussed later, Europeans and Africans themselves in the colonial period lacked due regard for the unique features of African culture. Those features have a value of their own that cannot be eclipsed by European culture, either in the comparable period before 1500 or in the subsequent centuries. They cannot be eclipsed because they are not really comparable phenomena. Who in this world is competent to judge whether Austrian Watts is better than a Watts is better than a Makande and Goma? Furthermore, even in those spheres of culture that are more readily comparable, such as the fine arts, it is known that African achievements of the pre-European period stand as contributions to man's heritage of beautiful creations. The art of Egypt, the Sudan, and Ethiopia was known to the rest of the world at an early date. That of the rest of Africa is still being discovered and rediscovered by Europeans and present-day Africans. The verdict of art historians on the Ife and Benin bronzes is well known. Since they date from the 14th and 15th century, they are very relevant to any discussion of African development and the epoch before the contacts with Europe. Nor should they be regarded as unusual except with regard to the material in which the sculptures were executed. The same skill and feelings obviously went into sculpture and artwork in non-durable materials, especially wood. African dance and art will almost invariably link with a religious world outlook in one way or another. As is well known, traditional African religious practices exist in great variety, and it should also be remembered that both Islam and Christianity found homes on the African continent almost from their very inception. The features of the traditional African religions help to set African cultures apart from those in other continents. But in this present context, it is more important to note how much African religion had in common with religion elsewhere, and how this can be used as an index to the level of development in Africa before European impact in the 15th century. Religion is an aspect of the superstructure of a society, deriving ultimately from the degree of control and understanding of the material world. However, when man thinks in religious terms, he starts from the idea rather than with the material world, which is beyond his comprehension. This creates a non-scientific and metaphysical way of viewing the world, which often conflicts with the scientific materialist outlook and with the development of society. African ancestral religions were no better or worse than other religions as such, but by the end of feudalism, Europeans began to narrow the area of human life in which religion and the church played the part. Religion ceased to dominate politics, geography, medicine. To free those things from religious restraints, it had to be argued that religion had its own sphere and the things of the world had their own secular sphere. This secularization of life speeded up the development of capitalism and later socialism. In contrast, in the period before the coming of the whites, religion pervaded African life just as it pervaded life in other pre-feudal societies, such as those of the Maoris of Australia, or the Afghans of Afghanistan, or the Vikings of Scandinavia. We could build there. Yeah, there was some. I think there's some important points here that's being made. I think it goes back to what you was talking about before, as far as just like defining phenomena, right? Defining things, taking back the meaning, and there was some things that was said in regards to. What did he say was right here? Cultural imperialism. Because of the impact of colonialism and cultural imperialism, Europeans and Africans themselves in the colonial period lacked due regard for the unique features of African culture. And I think like with Africans as well as the indigenous people of the Americas, this is something that they ran into when Europeans making contact with Europeans. And sort of just like this, and it was used as an excuse to take the lands and to enslave them is the cultural differences that they had, and so they didn't look at African culture, the uniqueness of African culture, and the beauty of African culture, which had a lot to do with their ignorance, and it had a lot to do with ethnocentrism or Eurocentrism. So it was used as sort of just like they would look at these things as something primitive and backwards. And now that they have to come and enforce their culture on these people because it'll help them. It sort of will liberate them from their barbarism. It will liberate them from their their state of I guess backwardness or heathenism. These are things that they will use to describe the people. And so, I just appreciated him raising that up and just talking about these the differences in the cultures and how that really like impacted the relationship between the two.
Yeah, I appreciated that. Also appreciated the outlook on religion. One thing I'm starting to learn more and more is religion in European society. It's not been like how it has been framed. Like you're learning a lot more that there was actually a real push for secularization, as Walter Rodney said, and secularization became a weapon basically to go into different places and have such a barbaric outlook as far as how we're going to handle colonizing people and enslaving people. And particularly right now, he's talking about the capitalization of Europe. So they're going to take the people and make them essentially worker slaves that are mindless and unable to think for themselves. And in contrast, religion, whether it's indigenous African religion or later the religions that came through the Abrahamic faith, religion's always been a vital thing inside of Africa. So the impetus is on us then to find a way to weaponize our religious beliefs against the European society. And if either that or we abandon, our cultural adherence to a religious doctrine in favor of secularization. But I don't think secularization ever worked well as far as Africa. We've always been a very religious people. So I think that's really, it opens up a conversation, whether the type of religion you practice, how do we weaponize it? How do we make it militant? And how do we make it pertaining to the material conditions, that colonialism has placed on us? I think that's what a lot of the work that is being attempting to be done. But I hope that more and more we see development in that specific area.
Yeah. Oh, I was off mute all that time. So yeah, I think like it's just going to the point that you were talking about in regards to religion, I'm thinking about just like the spirituality of these communities, Africans, indigenous people, and of Australia, the Americas. And at one time, like all people, there was sort of like this system where it wasn't the power of the spiritual system wasn't concentrated into the hands of one or a few people. It was a way like it pervaded their societal life, community life. Like everyone practiced it because it was just a part of their life. Like nobody had a monopoly over how to practice it. It was just inundated into the culture. That's different, I think, when it comes to especially like the dominant religions, the world religions, the society that we know of today, where a book was created, right, established, and only those people who were like literate were able to like interpret that. And so it took that power away. Once that book came in, it like took the power away from everyone who understood that, who had a individual connection and relationship, to the creator. So I think like that's important when we talk about the Europeans when they came into Africa and they came into the Americas with the book. It's like, hey, listen to me. It's in this book, and then Africans weren't even allowed to read. African slaves weren't even allowed to read. So now they had to go to, to the church and listen to the preacher to be able to get this interpretation. And of course, like in Europe, it was the same thing where you had over 90% of the people who were illiterate. So, but when you had the printing press and then, more and more people, that knowledge began to become diffused, I think it sort of went back to before, like I guess you could say like teachings that were put down into scriptures, the scribes and so forth. Like it goes before that where everyone had this connection. And so, but I think like with the diffusion of knowledge, it was able to put power back into the hands of the people. And that's why you had sort of like these revivals and great awakening periods where more and more people were challenging the authorities, even in Christianity and Islam and so forth. But I don't know, this is maybe some thoughts I had when you was talking about it.
Yeah. And I think like how it plays out against our favor. So obviously, I think, so I was in Ghana recently. Ghana is majority Christian country. And I think that how it plays out against our favor is that we have religion completely disconnected from political struggle. And we have that's dangerous to me because if you're at church 5 days a week, and then you go home, and then you're working, like, so like I go to work, then I go to church, or go to work, then I go to church, or whether it's a mosque or whatever type of religious space that you have. If that's the predominant means of expression for you, but it's disconnected from your political reality, then it becomes a distraction. It's nothing powerful. It's nothing groundbreaking. It's nothing liberating. And I think that's unfortunately like what's the demise, really of Africans, is that we have these this belief that we should keep these things separate and not try to find ways to politicize them. But if we're thinking back on our history, the times where our religious beliefs have led to liberation has never been when we kept them separate. It's always been when you have someone come out of a prophetic tradition, but doing so inside of with the liberation theology. So whether it was Malcolm X, who came, or before him, Elijah Muhammad, whether it was Nat Turner. I mean, there's such a long history that shows that marrying that, we don't have to lose that, for our liberation, but we have to put pressure on these institutions that we devote so much of our time to become politicized, or else, that's what I think we should really be pushing.
Yeah, and then I think the important part when it comes to whether you call your practice a religion or spiritual system, like our ancestors, they had this connection with the creator. They would ask for things. They would show veneration, but they always went and did the work. And so, a person could be spiritual and religious and still do. I think the problem becomes where you just think that your prayer is going to answer all of your problems. But I think like our people understood, it was they wanted to make sure that when before they went out and did the work, that they made sure that the gods that they venerated or get paid homage to, that they understood that, hey, we know that everything that we do and our results, it has to be contributed to you. And so when they went out there, they felt more confident that, okay, when we make these tools and we do this work, that we're going to get the results that we want to get because we have did what we had to do as far as venerating the Most High, or whatever you want to, call it. But I think like that's important. It was still like we got to go out and work, but the results of this work that we do is directly connected on our fidelity to the Creator.
Oh, I had something, I lost it, but yeah.
Hey, do we got time to do a paragraph? It's 10.
Yeah, let's go.
All right. So I'm at the bottom, right? Religion can play. Oh no, I'm not at the bottom. I'm right here. Religion is an aspect of. Am I there? Lost my spot. Religion is an aspect. I'm right there, right?
Oh wait, don't listen to me. I think religion can play, but that's my. Yeah.
Oh, religion can play. Oh yeah, you're right. Religion can play both a positive and negative role as an aspect of the superstructure. In most instances in early Africa, religious beliefs were associated with the mobilization and discipline of large numbers of people to form states. In a few instances, religion also provided concepts in the struggle for social justice. The negative aspects usually arose out of the tendency of religion to persist unchanged for extremely long periods, especially when the technology of earning a living changes very slowly. This was the case in African society as in all other pre-capitalist societies. At the same time, the religious beliefs themselves react upon the mode of production, further slowing up progress in that respect. For instance, belief in prayer and in the intervention of ancestors and various gods could easily be a substitute for innovations designed to control the impact and weather and environment.
Powerful. Okay, I remember the point I was going to make.
Yeah.
And I think it could tie into this paragraph too. And I think the way it's about the fact that there's been like imposed on us how we should interpret whatever our beliefs are, and kind of emphasis to take away things that are lethal to the colonial system. So even something I was thinking the other day, like I'm coming from a Christian perspective, so I'm thinking of like a deliverance emphasis, like there's deliverance, thinking about from things that you deal with personally, but not from the colonial system. So where is my deliverance from the colonial system as a person who's suffering, as a person who's poor? So that's the way that we can that we can have determine for ourselves, what this means for us, and drawing from what we've learned from our ancestors, the fact that these things should not be made impotent to our actual realities. So and I love what Walter Rodney put here is that belief in prayer and the intervention of the ancestors and various gods could easily be a substitute for innovations, design, and control the impact as far as the weather and the environment. Like, where is the emphasis on your environment? Where is the emphasis on the conditions that are enslaving you this very moment? Where is the emphasis on all of these multilateral institutions, these world organizations that are actively putting in place policies that are sucking the life out of your people? Where is the emphasis on that? So that's really a powerful way, I think, that we can intentionally radicalize ourselves and make sure that we're not allowing these things to become tools and weapons in the hands of the oppressor.
Yeah, I think like the last point I would make is that just going to this paragraph, religion can't be a substitute for revolutionary action. Your spiritual practice cannot be a substitute for revolutionary action. I think that we can still hold on to these practices, if that's what you choose to do. But to liberate our people is going to take a particular action. So I don't mind a person that's going to, be at home and pray that revolution takes place, or that, that is successful. But I think you got to pray for the strength that you're going to go out there and do what's necessary to make it happen. But you're going to have to go out there and make it happen. So, we're at 11 o'clock. It's another hour. We Charge Colonialism podcast and book club. Appreciate everyone for tuning in. We will be back here next week at the same time, continuing our reading of How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. I know an hour isn't enough, but we're going to try to get in much as we can in that hour. So appreciate y'all. Continue to share and like, and I'll see you next week.
Peace.